My name is Miles, 22 years old, senior at Westlake University, majoring in international relations with a minor in French. I've always been the cautious type, the kind of person who color codes his calendar and has a 5-year plan laminated in his wallet. My friends tease me about my obsession with organization, but it's served me well so far. A 3.9 GPA, a promising internship lined up for after graduation, and now, the crown jewel of my academic career, a semester abroad at Sciences Po in Paris. I'd been preparing for this exchange program for months, practicing my French with language apps, researching the Parisian metro system, even memorizing the menu of the cafe nearest to campus. What I hadn't prepared for was Marcel. The university had emailed a week before departure that we'd be paired with local students as part of a cultural exchange initiative. Your assigned buddy will help you navigate campus life and improve your language skills, the email explained. I'd pictured some bookish French student, perhaps wearing a beret. Yes, I know that's a stereotype, but stereotypes were all I had. The reality that greeted me in the International Student Office on that crisp September morning was something else entirely. Miles Crawford? Votre partenaire est Marcel Toussaint, the administrator said, gesturing to a tall young man leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone. Marcel looked up at the sound of his name, and I felt a jolt of surprise. He was black, which shouldn't have been surprising in cosmopolitan Paris, but somehow was to my sheltered American mind. Tall and lean, with close-cropped hair, warm brown skin, and the most captivating dark eyes I'd ever seen. He wore a navy blue sweater over a crisp white shirt, slim-fitting jeans, and leather boots that looked effortlessly stylish in that distinctly Parisian way. "Salad," he said, pushing off the wall and extending his hand. His voice was deep, with an accent that made even that simple greeting sound musical. "Je suis Marcel." I took his hand, momentarily forgetting all the French I'd practiced. "Hi. I mean bonjour. Je m'appelle Miles." My pronunciation felt clumsy compared to his smooth tones. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Your accent. Very American." "Sorry," I said automatically. Non, he replied, switching fully to English that was impressively fluent if slightly accented. "It's charming. Don't worry, we will work on it together." And just like that, I was assigned to Marcel Toussaint, a third-year political science student whose family had immigrated from Senegal when he was a child. Marcel, who navigated Paris with the ease of someone born to its winding streets. Marcel, whose laugh could warm the coldest Parisian winter day. Marcel, who would utterly dismantle my carefully constructed plans without even trying. That first day, he gave me a tour of the campus, pointing out the libraries, the best cafeterias, and the hidden courtyards where students gathered between classes. He spoke a mix of French and English, slowing down his French when he saw my confusion and helping me with vocabulary. "You speak English very well," I commented as we sat at a cafe near campus, Marcel insisting I try a proper French espresso rather than the dishwater American coffee I was used to. He shrugged, that elegant Gallic gesture that seemed to come naturally to everyone here. "I studied in London for a summer. And American films, of course. Everyone here watches them." "Your accent is perfect," I said, then felt embarrassed by the compliment. "Pas parfait, but thank you." He smiled, and I noticed a small dimple in his left cheek. "Now, tell me about yourself." "Miles from America." "What brings you to Sciences Po?" I explained my major, my interest in international diplomacy, my hopes to work for the State Department or an NGO someday. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. "And beyond studies? What do you enjoy?" he asked after I'd exhausted my academic aspirations. The question caught me off guard. What did I enjoy? Most of my energy had always been directed toward achievement rather than enjoyment. "I like photography," I finally said. "Nothing professional, just capturing moments." His eyes lit up. "Paris is perfect for that. The light here, it changes everything. You must bring your camera next time." I'll show you my favorite spots. The idea of a next time with Marcel was surprisingly appealing. Despite our different backgrounds, conversation flowed easily between us, a mix of cultural observations, academic discussions, and gentle teasing about our respective countries' peculiarities. As promised, our next meeting involved my camera, a decent digital SLR I'd brought for documenting my semester abroad. Marcel took me to Montmartre, away from the tourist-heavy areas of Sacré-Cœur, to winding streets where artists still lived and worked. The light here, it is special, he explained as I adjusted my settings. Especially in the early morning or late afternoon. The painters have known this for centuries. He was right. The Parisian light had a quality I'd never seen before, golden and soft, illuminating the old buildings and narrow streets with an almost ethereal glow. I lost myself in photography, barely noticing as Marcel occasionally guided me with a light touch on my elbow or shoulder, steering me toward particularly photogenic vistas. "You have a good eye," he commented, looking over my shoulder at a shot I'd just taken of an elderly man painting at an easel, the light catching the silver in his hair. His breath was warm against my neck, and I felt a strange flutter in my stomach at his proximity. "Thanks," I managed, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. "It helps to have a good guide." He smiled that dimpled smile again. "Hungry? I know a place nearby. Not touristy, authentic food." The restaurant was tiny, just 6 tables in a room barely larger than my dorm back home. The owner greeted Marcel with kisses on both cheeks and rapid-fire French that was far too quick for me to follow. We were seated at a corner table and served without menus. Marcel had apparently ordered for both of us with a few words to the owner. "I hope you don't mind," he said, noticing my confusion. "Madame Leblanc makes only a few dishes each day, whatever is fresh. Trust me, it will be delicious." It was some kind of fish in a buttery sauce, crusty bread, and vegetables I couldn't name, but eagerly devoured. Marcel watched with amusement as I cleaned my plate. "The food in the cafeteria is not so good, eh?" I laughed. "Nothing in America is this good. How is this place not packed with tourists? They don't know, and we like it that way." He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Paris has 2 faces, the one for tourists, and the one for those who live here. I will show you the real Paris, if you like." "I'd like that very much," I said, meaning it more than I expected to. Over the next few weeks, our official buddy meetings expanded into regular hangouts. Marcel introduced me to his friends, a diverse group of students from various backgrounds, all effortlessly cool in that French way that still intimidated me slightly. He helped me navigate the university bureaucracy, improved my French pronunciation, and showed me a Paris I would never have discovered on my own. In return, I helped him with his English essays, explained American politics as best I could, and shared my perspectives on the international relations theories we were both studying from different angles. We fell into an easy friendship that quickly became the highlight of my Parisian experience. I found myself looking forward to his texts. "Free this afternoon?" New exhibition at Centre Pompidou, and rearranging my carefully planned schedule to accommodate impromptu adventures with him. My fellow American exchange students noticed. "Someone's got a crush on his French buddy," teased Emma, another student from my program, as we sat in a mandatory exchange student meeting. "It's not like that," I protested, feeling my cheeks warm. "We're just friends." She hummed skeptically. "That's why you're checking your phone every 2 minutes to see if he's texted." Was I? I hadn't even realized. "He's showing me around. That's all. It's part of the program." "The program doesn't require him to take you to dinner 3 times a week," she pointed out, "or for you to light up like the Eiffel Tower whenever he walks into a room." I dismissed her comments, but they lingered in my mind. Did I have feelings for Marcel? The idea was unsettling, not because he was a man. I'd known I was gay since high school, but because it complicated everything. He was probably straight. He was French. I was only here for a semester. Any feelings would be impractical at best, disastrous at worst. But practical or not, those feelings were becoming harder to ignore. It happened on a rainy October evening. We'd been caught in a sudden downpour while walking along the Seine, and Marcel had pulled me into the shelter of a small bookshop. Water dripped from our hair and jackets as we browsed the crowded shelves, Marcel pointing out French authors he thought I should read. "This one," he said, pulling a slim volume from a shelf, "Camus. L'Étranger. You know it in English?" "The Stranger? I've heard of it, but never read it," I admitted. "You must. It's about an outsider, someone who doesn't fit into society's expectations." He handed me the book, our fingers brushing. "Sometimes being an outsider gives you a clearer perspective. Is that how you feel?" I asked, suddenly curious. "Like an outsider?" A shadow passed over his face. "Sometimes. France is my home, but people see my skin before they see my passport." He shrugged, that eloquent French gesture again. "But it's complicated. My family is Senegalese. My education is French. My music is American. I exist in between." "That sounds lonely," I said softly. His eyes met mine, something vulnerable in their depths. "Sometimes, but not right now." The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something I couldn't name but could definitely feel. We were standing close, surrounded by books, the rain pattering against the windows creating a cocoon of sound around us. For a wild moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he gently took the book from my hands and walked to the register. "A gift," he said over his shoulder. "Your first real French novel." That night, I lay awake in my small dormitory room, turning the book over in my hands, tracing the inscription he'd written inside the cover. "To Miles, may you always find clarity in being an outsider. Marcel." The next morning, I woke to a text from him. "Busy today? There's a jazz club in Saint-Germain I think you'd enjoy." We met that evening outside the club, a basement venue with low ceilings and an intimate atmosphere. Marcel greeted me with the customary kisses on both cheeks that still made my heart rate quicken, though I was becoming more accustomed to the French custom. "You look nice," he commented, his eyes taking in my button-down shirt and dark jeans, a step up from my usual casual attire. "Thanks," I said, fighting a blush. "So do you." An understatement. He wore a deep burgundy sweater that contrasted beautifully with his skin, and jeans that fit him perfectly. Inside, the club was dimly lit and already filling with people. Marcel secured us a small table near the stage, ordering drinks in rapid French that still largely eluded me despite my improving language skills. "I didn't know you liked jazz," I said as we settled in. "My father's influence. He discovered American jazz when he came to France and passed the love to me." His eyes were warm in the low light. "It's another example of my cultural mix. African rhythms, reinterpreted by Americans, now enjoyed in Paris." The music began, a quartet playing classic jazz standards with occasional French influences. Under the table, our knees touched, neither of us moving away. The combination of the music, the dim lighting, and Marcel's proximity was intoxicating. Between sets, we talked about everything and nothing. Our classes, our families, our aspirations. Marcel told me about his parents' journey from Senegal, their determination to give him opportunities they never had, their initial disappointment when he chose political science instead of medicine or law. "They understand now," he said, his voice fond. "They see that I can make a difference in my own way. Perhaps in international development, bringing resources back to West Africa. That's similar to what I want to do," I realized aloud. "Using international relations to make concrete improvements in people's lives." "We are not so different, you and I," he said, his eyes holding mine, "despite coming from such different worlds." As the evening progressed, and the music played on, something shifted between us. Our conversation became more personal, our glances held longer, the space between us seemed to shrink. When his hand brushed mine reaching for his drink, neither of us immediately pulled away. Walking back to campus later, The Parisian night cool around us. Marcel was quieter than usual. A tension had built between us, unacknowledged but palpable. "Thank you for tonight," I said as we reached the point where our paths would diverge. He to his apartment in the 13th arrondissement, me to my dormitory. I really enjoyed it. "Miles," he said, then paused, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since I'd known him. "I want to be clear about something." My heart raced. "Yes." "Tonight was not just two friends at a jazz club," he said carefully. "For me, it was more. But I understand if you don't feel the same, or if it's complicated because you're only here temporarily." The world seemed to pause around us. The noise of the city faded, and all I could see was Marcel, illuminated by a nearby street lamp, his expression open and vulnerable. "It's more for me too," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could overthink them. "I just didn't know if you. I wasn't sure if." He smiled, that dimple appearing in his cheek. "If I liked men? Yes. If I liked you? Also yes. Very much." And then he was kissing me, right there on a Parisian street corner, his hands cupping my face with a gentleness that contrasted with the urgency of his lips. I kissed him back, all my carefully constructed restraint dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've been wanting to do that since the day we met," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" I asked, my hands still resting on his shoulders, unwilling to let go. "I wasn't sure if you felt the same, and I didn't want to make your time in Paris uncomfortable if you didn't." He brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. "Also, I've never dated an American before. I wasn't sure about the cultural differences." I laughed softly. "I've never dated a French guy either. Guess we'll have to figure it out together." "I'd like that," he said, taking my hand in his. Starting now. That night marked the beginning of something I hadn't planned for, but couldn't resist. Marcel and I fell into a relationship that felt both thrilling and comfortable, as if we'd known each other much longer than a few weeks. We studied together in cozy cafes, wandered through museums hand in hand, and discovered each other's bodies in the privacy of his apartment, with its view of Parisian rooftops and chimney pots. Marcel was a patient teacher, of French, of Paris, of pleasure. He found my American directness amusing but refreshing, while I was captivated by his eloquence and the way he could discuss philosophy over breakfast as easily as he could talk about soccer. Our cultural differences created occasional misunderstandings, but more often led to fascinating conversations and new perspectives for both of us. "You Americans are always in such a hurry," he observed one lazy Sunday morning as we lingered over coffee and croissants in his tiny kitchen. "Always rushing to the next achievement, the next milestone. And you French take 3 hours for lunch and then wonder why nothing gets done." I countered, though there was no bite to my words. In truth, I was coming to appreciate the French approach to time, the emphasis on enjoyment rather than efficiency. "Not nothing," he corrected, leaning across the table to kiss me. "Just different priorities." My fellow exchange students were supportive if slightly envious of my authentic French experience, as Emma teasingly called it. Marcel's friends welcomed me into their circle with a warmth that surprised me, given the reputation of Parisians as standoffish toward foreigners. "You make him happy," explained Marcel's best friend Remy during a group dinner at a crowded bistro. "That's all that matters to us." But as November turned to December and the end of my semester abroad loomed closer, a certain melancholy began to color our time together. Neither of us spoke directly about the future, as if by avoiding the topic we could prevent the inevitable separation. It was Marcel who finally broached the subject, 2 weeks before I was scheduled to fly home. We were sitting on a bench in the Luxembourg Gardens, bundled against the winter chill, watching children sail toy boats on the pond. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said, his gloved hand holding mine tightly. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I know. I don't want this to end when you leave," he continued. But I am also realistic about long-distance relationships. They are difficult even in the best circumstances. And these aren't the best circumstances, I acknowledged. An ocean between us, different time zones, no clear timeline for when we might be in the same place again. He turned to face me, his dark eyes serious. That is true. But also what we have, it's rare, Miles. I don't want to let it go without trying. Hope fluttered in my chest. What are you suggesting? I have applied for an internship in Washington for next summer, he revealed. With the World Bank. It's competitive, but my professors think I have a good chance. I stared at him, processing this information. You applied for an internship in D.C.? When? Last month, he admitted. After that night at the jazz club. I was already considering it, but after that, I wanted to create possibilities for us. The realization that he had been planning, hoping for a future together while I had been avoiding thinking about it altogether, made me feel both touched and slightly ashamed. While I had been focusing on the inevitable end, he had been creating potential beginnings. That's amazing, I said, squeezing his hand. D.C. is only a 4-hour train ride from Boston. We could see each other on weekends. Exactly. His smile was cautious but hopeful. And after that, who knows? Your career interests could bring you to international organizations. Mine as well. Perhaps Paris again, or Geneva, or New York. You've thought about this a lot, I observed. Of course. Haven't you? The truth was, I hadn't allowed myself to think about it. My 5-year plan didn't include falling in love with a French Senegalese political science student. It didn't account for the way Marcel had changed my perspective, not just on international relations, but on life itself. The value of spontaneity, the beauty of cultural exchange, the importance of connection over achievement. I'm thinking about it now, I said honestly. And I want to try? I don't know exactly how it will work, but I know I'm not ready to say goodbye. His smile bloomed fully then, that dimple I'd grown to love appearing in his cheek. Good, because I have become quite attached to you. Miles from America with the terrible French accent. Hey, my accent has improved, I protested, laughing despite the emotions tightening my chest. Marginally, he conceded, pulling me closer on the bench. We still have 2 weeks to work on it. Those final 2 weeks in Paris were bittersweet. Every experience tinged with the knowledge that it might be our last together for some time. We visited places Marcel had been saving for special occasions, made love with a new urgency, and took countless photos to sustain us through the coming separation. On my last night, Marcel prepared dinner in his apartment, a traditional Senegalese dish his mother had taught him, rich with spices and flavors I'd never experienced before. A taste of another part of my heritage, he explained as he served the fragrant stew. So you know all of me before you go. After dinner, we exchanged gifts. I gave him a leather-bound journal I'd found in a small shop in Le Marais, with his initials embossed on the cover. For all your brilliant political theories, I said, the ones that will change the world someday. His gift to me was a vintage camera strap, handcrafted from supple leather and embroidered with tiny Parisian landmarks. To remind you of what you've seen, he said softly, and perhaps encourage you to return to see more. We didn't sleep that night. Instead, we talked until dawn, made love as the first light of day filtered through his curtains, and held each other as if we could imprint the memory of this closeness onto our skin. At the airport, surrounded by the bustle of travelers, our goodbye felt surreal. Marcel held my face in his hands, his eyes memorizing my features. This is not an ending, he said firmly. Just a pause. A pause, I agreed, trying to believe it. Call me when you land in D.C. this summer, and I'll be on the first train. I will hold you to that promise. He kissed me one last time, deeply and thoroughly, heedless of the crowds around us. Je t'aime, Miles. Je t'aime aussi. I replied, my French accent finally, in this most important phrase, sounding almost natural. Walking through security, I looked back to see him still standing there, tall and beautiful, raising a hand in farewell. My chest ached with the effort of leaving, but also swelled with something that felt remarkably like hope. Back in Boston, readjusting to American life and my final semester of college, I carried Paris and Marcel with me. We video called almost daily, sharing the small details of our lives despite the time difference. I showed him the snowy campus through my phone camera. He took me on virtual walks through his Paris neighborhoods. When he received his acceptance to the World Bank internship in March, we celebrated across the ocean, opening champagne simultaneously in our respective time zones. My carefully constructed 5-year plan had been thoroughly disrupted, but in its place was something more organic, more flexible, and infinitely more exciting. I applied for graduate programs in international relations that would keep me on the East Coast, close to D.C. Marcel began researching PhD programs in the States as well as Europe. We were building bridges across the Atlantic, creating a future neither of us could have imagined before that September day when I walked into the International Student Office at Sciences Po. My friends here ask if it's worth it, the long distance, the uncertainty, the cultural complexities. I think about Marcel's words that day in the bookshop. Sometimes being an outsider gives you a clearer perspective. Through him, I've gained a new perspective on what matters, on the kind of life and career I want to build. I look at the calendar on my wall, no longer color-coded and rigid, but flexible, with one date circled in bold red, June 15th, Marcel's arrival in D.C. 3 months and counting. My name is Miles, 22 years old, soon-to-be graduate of Westlake University, and no longer the cautious person I once was. I fell in love in Paris with a man who taught me that the most valuable experiences are the ones you don't plan for. Our story isn't simple or conventional, but then again, the most important connections rarely are. And while I don't know exactly where we'll end up, I know that whatever bridges we need to cross, oceans, cultures, languages, we'll find a way to build them together.